Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road, where today's guest is Kevin Kraner. Kevin's going to sit down and share with us an amazing encounter he had with God and how it changed his life and led to an amazing experience with him down the road. Kevin, thank you so much for being here today.
Pleasure, thank you.
I tell you, we've had some ripped guests, but you might be number one, brother.
Well, thank you.
How many hours a day do you spend lifting?
I say 1.5 to 2. I'm in the gym.
So a couple hours a day. Do you do 7 days a week or take a day off?
I try to do 7 days a week, but take a day off if I need to. Yeah, usually when I have my son, I'm off, but he likes to go to the gym with me, so it just depends.
Do you do all body parts, or do you do specific body parts on a given day?
Right now I'm doing specific body parts on a given day. Bis and tris together, and then back alone, and some legs and shoulders, and then chest alone, so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You played football at West Noble.
I did.
And you walked on at Purdue when Coach Tiller was coach. I'd like you to talk about what that was like.
That was a phenomenal thing to do. It was part of my studies that I did with Purdue, studied exercise science, and as I was training the athletes and doing those type of things, one of the coaches said, "Hey, we think you should try to walk on and see if you can do this." And I put some thought into it and gave it a shot, and I made the practice squad. So.
You were a linebacker?
I was a linebacker. I was. So I played with them for a season. Just helped do, basically line up across from what we call the varsity team and help them prepare for the games every Saturday. So it was quite the thing, quite the challenge.
You made it to second on the depth chart?
Yep, one time I did. So that was good.
Did you encounter Coach Tiller much? Enough that you could comment on what it was like?
Coach Tiller was a very humble guy. He was very direct. He was very passionate, obviously, about football. And he was just a great motivator. After you'd have a talk with you, you'd have the feeling that you could pretty much run through a brick wall. He would get you ready to go, and he would be able to help pull out, the best in you. If you had any kind of self-doubt, he would be able to bring that up and out of you. So,
I had dinner with him twice for a special event that we were doing together. So they were a year apart, and I just felt like he was this kind of guy that after talking to him for just a few minutes, you say, "Okay, let's go, Coach. I'll go wherever you tell me to go."
Yeah, absolutely.
He just had that magnetism about him.
He did, and obviously during the Purdue years he was there, we were very good in football.
Yes.
So,
you grew up Catholic, and you talk about in college you wandered from your faith. Evangelicals might call it building a testimony.
Sure.
But on your 21st birthday was a pivotal event in your life. I'd like you to describe it.
It absolutely was. Turned 21, went out to do what every other 21-year-old would want to do, go out and have their first drink, and never made it home that night. My friend and I, we wrapped our car around a pole. So we went down into a ditch, hit a cement culvert, went airborne, wrapped it around the pole, and I was pronounced dead at the scene. I broke my arm, I broke my leg, broke my jaw in 4 places, severe head trauma, and was flatlined in the emergency room, and then, made it through. So
you're pronounced dead. They put the sheet over you, and probably not attending to you.
Right.
Where do you come back to life? Do you know?
I don't remember. I remember going to see the car at the scrapyard to see what it looked like, and the guys that pulled the car out from the accident scene said it took you 2 hours to get you out of that car at the jaws of life, and said they couldn't find a pulse on you, pronounced you dead. They never called 2 EMSs to the scene of an accident, pulled you out, laid you down, put the sheet over you, and he goes, and then you sat up and looked around and started screaming. And I was like, I don't remember any of that. Nothing.
Now, did you have a heaven-type experience?
I did. I remember in the emergency room, I remember my brother and my mom being in there, and then I kind of blacked out. I remember looking straight ahead and seeing a bright white light, and just hearing people saying everything's going to be okay, you're going to be fine. And then the next thing is I wake up in a hospital room a day later.
So you're looking down on yourself?
Yep, I'm looking down on myself. I can see myself laying on a table.
Did you hear a voice?
I did. I heard a couple voices just saying everything's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. You're going to make it.
Do you think that was in the hospital room, or was that in the spiritual realm?
I think I was in the spiritual realm.
Wow.
I really do.
So what needs to be done to experience healing when you wake up?
Just a lot of time. I think I recovered from that for a couple of years, being able to walk and utilize my arm again. And I did lose some cognitive things. I couldn't remember some things and had a hard time tying the shoe for a while, but everything would come back after a while. And so, again, that's just when I committed myself to fitness, and I was going to put myself through my own type of rehab, and that's what I did. Spent some time in the gym, and that's how I got into the exercise science kinesiology part, because I got myself better. And I found it very interesting what the body can do. Bringing it back from, the lowest level of being broken to getting yourself strong and back up again.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything that's a carryover today from that accident?
Yeah, I've got 2 metal plates in my arm. I've got a nice scar that reminds me every day of what I did.
You said that moment was like an aha moment for you on God being real, heaven being real.
Mm-hmm.
How did it affect your life from those first few years?
Gave me more direction. It gave me a passion for, life in general, to be better at what I was doing and to get in something to help individuals with things. I think at that time and point, I realized that I want to do something in my career and for the rest of my life to help others.
Mm-hmm. So you graduate with your exercise science kinesiology degree, and do you go to Notre Dame right away as an assistant strength and conditioning coach?
We would travel up and back and forth there through the year to go up there and work with their strength staff as well. So it wasn't necessarily being part of the staff, it was being a volunteer part of the staff. So we would help do the training and go up there and see what type of programs they were doing for their football athletes and their volleyball athletes. And so that was my 2 fortes that I worked with. And so really got some good experience with their staff.
Your dad owned the Dairy Queen in Kendallville?
He did.
And he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and you actually came back and ran the restaurant for a while?
I did.
Had you grown up working in it?
Yes, I did. I grew up working in it.
So you can make a good burger?
I can.
And you can make the loop on the cone?
We can, yeah.
Oh, that's
It's got to go a
awesome.
certain way. It's a Dairy Queen trademark.
That's awesome. So how long did you run the Dairy Queen?
I don't remember it until he got better. Then I kind of faded out and started pursuing some things here in Fort Wayne.
What'd you do next?
I worked at O&E for a division of them called Performance One, where I worked with athletes. And at that point, I was stationed at IPFW and worked with the men's and women's basketball team and the women's volleyball.
Is conditioning different for a volleyball player than it would be for a basketball player?
Absolutely.
How would it be different?
Specific
You
to
can
the
pick
sport.
whatever sports you want, but give me a couple sports and how it would be different.
Football is going to be a lot of strength training. Building individuals have a lot of strength training, different types of explosive movements. Not a lot of base jumping. You still want them to be explosive for, say, a follow-through on a tackle. For a volleyball player, you want them to be able to approach, a step, and be explosive out of a movement moving forward. So with the volleyball player, lots of mobility in the shoulders, hips, based on how they hit the ball. A lot of lateral movement, being more explosive left to right, working in a certain plane of movement, a frontal plane. So it's just breaking down the sport with each athlete specific to their position.
If somebody wanted to be explosive like that, they're in that kind of a sport, and then they're going to go out and run 3.5 miles to condition for that sport, that's probably not the right thing for them to do.
Probably not, no. If they want to run 3 miles, I'd say keep it a low to moderate, target heart rate, condition your heart. That's the most important muscle in the body, but I wouldn't encourage that all the time.
So you end up doing the training for the universities, and then that leads you to doing some more here in Fort Wayne, some personal training for people?
Yes, sir. Yep.
And how'd that go?
It went well. I've made a lot of great connections. Worked at numerous gyms here in Fort Wayne. Had the opportunity to help them grow their health and wellness part of their facility, as well as the overall fitness part of it. Made a lot of great connections in Fort Wayne by doing so.
Well, I run into you at a volleyball club where we're training some of my girls, and we got to know each other, and I'd heard about the accident and what you had experienced at Purdue. But you start working out, you say, at the highest level of your life, but you didn't know you were really strengthening yourself for something to come.
Right.
What was that something?
Well, that something was cancer. I was working out, and through the period of working out, I thought I hurt my back, being active, get a little bit older. I can't do the things I used to be able to do. So I thought going through my workout sessions, I may have hurt my back. And so that was going on for, I want to say, looking back on it, probably for over a year that I was having some issues with my back, and then other symptoms would come on, and it just all built up to finally being diagnosed with it, which took a long time for them to finally figure out what was wrong with me. Took 2 trips to the emergency room for them to finally figure out that that's what I had.
I think you went into a walk-in clinic and you got a steroid packet or something. They thought maybe you were just...
Yeah, just a herniated disc.
Yeah.
Yep, I would make numerous trips to the walk-in clinic, and they would just give me a steroid packet and send me on my way.
So what was it?
Type of cancer
Yeah.
was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was stage 4 when they found it, and they considered me to be terminal because I was covered so much with it, and they just weren't sure what was going to happen. I ended up having 2 huge masses on my spine, one at T12, one at L3. The areas where I kept pointing that they said, "Well, your disc is out," and I was covered from that point.
How'd you feel when you heard the diagnosis?
It's the first thing that comes to your mind is, not me, why me? And I was like, "You sure that's right?" Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of giggle a little bit, a nervous kind of laugh. But then, when you're actually left in that room by yourself and to really think about what they just told you, it starts to hit home a little bit. You have a moment of breakdown, and then you have to decide how you're going to face this challenge.
Now, did they schedule an MRI to determine that you had cancer, or do they do that after they know that you have cancer?
What it was is the first night I went into the emergency room, again, they just gave me some medication to kind of mask the pain and said they would schedule an MRI out the following week. And so here's some pain medicine. This will get you through until we get you in, and then we'll see what's going on. I went back the very next day and said, you guys need to give me something now. And so they gave me a scan, and then that's when they figured out that that's what it was. It was big, huge masses on my spine, and they weren't sure what kind it was until I had a couple biopsies, but, that's what they determined what it was.
You were actually walking, I think, at a shopping mall, and you collapsed.
I did. I went into the emergency room, I believe, on it would have maybe a Friday night, maybe Friday or Saturday night. Felt good the next day. I thought I'd go do some Christmas shopping, and there at Northcrest Shopping Center, I parked down by one area of the shoe carnival. I thought I'm gonna walk all the way down to Kohl's. Nice walk, nice day. And I got down to Kohl's and dropped to my knees, and it took me probably 45 minutes to an hour to get back to my car. Between a little scooting my feet and stopping and crawling a little bit, and it was pretty bad. It hit me all of a sudden again, and that's when I had to go back to the emergency room.
And there's really no catalyst to it? Like, you can't look back and say, this act caused that, the cancer?
No, I can't think back on anything. I know that I was having symptoms, and I look back and understand and know the symptoms of that type of cancer. I had a majority of those. They were just all overlooked.
Mm-hmm. What were your first treatments?
My first treatments was a couple rounds, I think 4 or 5 rounds of radiation to shrink those masses on my spine. They were wrapped around my spine, protruding through, cutting off my spinal fluid, which caused me the inability to walk, and they were afraid I was going to go into paralysis. So I went through 5 rounds of radiation, they shrunk it, and then they did 2 surgeries, biopsy surgeries to see what they were. And so I went and got a couple different, I don't know what you call those, explanations of what they could have been, and so diagnosis, and that's what they came up with is the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
So you have 7 or 8 chemotherapy treatments?
I think so, yeah, right around 8, I believe, is what it was.
And I remember I was texting a little bit there. Bob Sutton, our mutual friend who had been through cancer before, I think had reached out to you.
Absolutely.
You had a lot of people coming around you. What's going on in you spiritually at this time?
Starting to lean on God a lot. A lot of praying. A lot of people were coming around me, which was very wonderful. It's such a hard thing because I have a son, and he was getting ready to turn 2, Dominic, yeah. And so, it's a lot going through your mind. I think I'm young and I'm healthy, and then all of a sudden you're faced with, a life-challenging battle. Just didn't know what to really think. And so a lot of praying, a lot of asking God to put wisdom in the nurses and the doctors that were going through these series of treatments for me, and to make sure that they, made the right choices on what it was that was going to help me through this.
Did you feel anxiety, depression, loneliness, that kind of a thing?
I felt a lot of, anxiety just because of what was going on. And I was depressed about it because, again, you're in disbelief and denial of this is you. But then the most part, I was really sick. I mean, it was bad. I couldn't walk. I couldn't lay down without pain. It was something else. And then as I started going through treatment, then things got a lot worse.
What happened? You get weaker from the treatment?
Yeah, you get weaker. You know, I go in there thinking I'm Superman. They give me Ferring in the hospital, and I'm walking around with my chemo treatment. It wasn't like an inpatient. It was an inpatient treatment. So I was in for 5 days, hooked up for 4 rounds of chemo. So a chemo session started off with a spinal injection of chemo in the spine. Then I have to lay flat for 8 to 10 hours. And then after that, they would hook me up to my actual chemotherapy. And I was hooked up to that for 5 days until it was gone. But it was dose adjusted. So every time I would go in, I was always weaker, and they would always increase that dose. And so I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And about halfway through, it was pretty rough. I lost all my fingernails, my toenails, all my hair, and getting all these sores on my lips and in my mouth. And yeah, it was a challenge.
When you mentioned the 5 days, is that one treatment?
Yeah, one treatment. I was in the hospital for 5 days straight. So big bag of chemo. When I ran out of that one, they replaced it and went through another. So I went through 4 big bags while I was there.
Did you have health insurance?
Yes.
Praise the Lord.
Yes.
So the 7 or 8 chemo treatments is over several weeks.
Yes. Majority of 2016 was all treatment up until July, August.
And then were you having pseudo seizures?
Yep. About towards the end of it, there was 1 week I went in, and the nurses and everybody noticed that there was, I wasn't myself. I wasn't walking around all day long like I normally do. And I was really getting sick, and I would go in there and have fevers of over 100 degrees, and I was getting nauseous all the time. And I remember as far as I would go would be the chapel. And I'd go up there and I'd pray and do things in the chapel. And that's the majority of the place I spent a lot of my time, just a lot of prayer, a lot of thought. And I'm up there one day, and I feel something brush along my neck and say, you need to go back to your room or go back to the room. I look around, there's nobody there. Like, all right, well, this is kind of crazy. So, but I got up, I wasn't feeling well, and I went back to the room. And as soon as I went into my room, I thought, well, I'm not going to lay in bed. I'm going to sit on the couch. And I went around my bed, and that's the last thing I remember. I dropped to the floor, and then staff came in and tried to bring me back to life. Not back to life, but bring me back around. And they ended up diagnosing with what they call a pseudo seizure, where your brain shuts your body down. So they were saying I was fighting it so much that my brain just shut the body down because I couldn't take any more. So I remember seeing everybody working on me, giving me a sternum rub and all this stuff. My vitals were there. I just couldn't respond in any way. I could see you. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't feel you.
So you were that drained from everything at that point.
Yeah.
Well, is there a point in the chemotherapy where you start to bounce back, or when chemotherapy, the first attempt and the season of it is done, is that kind of your bottom?
Yeah, that pseudo seizure episode was kind of the rock bottom of the chemo. They weren't sure at that point if I was going to make it through or not. Vitals were bad. I was going downhill, and they just weren't sure what exactly, was going to happen with me. And of all places, they put me in the hospice wing of the hospital.
Oh my! What?
That's why I did all my chemo treatments.
Oh my!
So it was a challenge. I'm like, all right, well, here we go.
Were you attending church at the time?
I was.
And did you have any other male relationships that were investing in you, coming alongside you?
I did. A young man by the name of Kurt Chalice would come all the time. He went through some chemo with me, and he was up in my room daily for hours, sitting with me. Even when I would fall asleep or I'd wake up, he'd be there. And then we would, go through some verses and talk about treatment, because he's been there and understands that, and it's hard to talk to somebody that's never been through chemo or been through the cancer. They can feel for you, pray for you, but to really understand how you feel and what you're exactly going through, you got to go through the chemo, which I wish upon nobody.
Right.
Yeah, it's a bad thing.
Did you finally come to a point where it was in remission? And if so, do you know what led to that?
Made a major turnaround. Going through the treatments, I started coming back up out of things. And about my last round of chemo, I went through and I got checked and said, okay, everything looks good. You're going to be in remission. They kept checking me periodically through. But I think, just a lot of praying, a lot of people coming around me. When I was tired and resting, everybody else was fighting for me. I think is what really helped. And yeah, it's just, I don't really know how to explain it. I'm very thankful for it. It was one of the, I'd say, is the toughest thing I've ever gone through in my life. And so,
Did so you get a clean bill of health that you're in remission, and did you have it come back?
there was a little bit of a scare for a while. It would have been maybe last year, last Thanksgiving. Yeah, they said that there was a few things that just didn't look normal in me, and the way I was feeling didn't kind of coincide with where I should have been. And so yeah, they put me on a chemo pill and went through more of a treatment that way rather than have them put the port back in.
Mm.
I didn't want that to happen.
And you got a clean bill of health now.
I'm a good clean bill of health now.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Um, I think there was a moment where you're meeting with some guys and you fall to your knees and surrender your life to Christ.
Hmm.
You cry out to Him. Can you describe that moment?
Yeah. Talking with some gentlemen and, just walking along a discipleship with these guys. My good friend Kurt, you know, we would meet every Tuesday and walk through and talk about a lot of things. And, going through some issues with my health and had some family things going on. Just really relying on God on a lot of things and leaning really heavy on a verse, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And a lot of times when you're faced with trials and tribulations, who else is there to turn to?
Yeah.
And so He is the one, and I feel very confident that He's the one that's got me my health back and has given me opportunity again to pursue what I want to do in life, and that's to help people. But yeah, you drop down, you finally realize that, you have to be thankful and ask God to come into your life and into your heart and help you move forward. And it was great, and the accountability that I'm still held at by gentlemen like you and Kurt and a few other guys, my friend Andy, these guys, come around me when I need it the most, and that's what it's all about.
Well, we're all a work in progress, and it's really cool to see how God is molding and shaping you to bring His restoration to others. Can you look back to the accident where you were pronounced dead and you had the encounter in the spiritual realm and see that God had something in store for you after that?
Yeah, I went through the wreck, and then that's when I built myself back up, kind of rehabbing myself, and went to school and working with the athletes and walking on, the football team and being as active as I was when I was told I was never going to be. And then, like we mentioned earlier, you kind of slip away from things for a little bit, and you kind of come back into it. And then the second encounter with life, the cancer, and I think up to that point, I was young, 40 years old, and just starting my life out with some things and a career with the volleyball clinic and Will empowered. And I just started getting sicker, but I was still being able to exercise and work, to that point. So I think that I was allowed to work up to that point to where I was finally diagnosed because He allowed me to prepare myself for the biggest battle I was about ready to fight, and that was for my life. And so I sit back and I think, and that's where I thank God. And I always ask God, what's my purpose? Why did I go through this? But I have to trust. What He's doing with me and what He's doing in my life, and just go with that and be as humble as I possibly can through the process.
What are you reading in the scriptures now and studying?
Right now, I'm reading in the book of John. Yeah, I'm going back through that, trying to lay the base with myself on how to treat people, be kind, watch my wording with people, and then I always fall back into, the Philippians. I flip through the Psalms quite a bit. Psalm, I think it's 139, is a prayer I use often. Searching my heart for sin and along those lines. So.
Well, you're an amazing story. God spared your life on this side, I believe, for the purpose. Purpose includes your son and to bring His restoration to others, and what you're doing for people with their health and their strength. And it's just a powerful testimony to God's grace. And I want to thank you for everything that you're doing.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Our prayer for you would be, wherever you are, that you would consider God examining your heart and just cry out to God and say, God, search me and know me. Know in Hebrew does not mean mental assent. It's not facts. It is an experience. It is a connection. It is intimacy. It's God's inner being connected with ours. So when this is prayed, you're saying, you know, God, search me and experience me. Is there any way inside me that's not what you want it to be? And for some of us, you know, that's a scary prayer. You know, maybe you're clicking where you shouldn't. Maybe you're texting where you shouldn't. Maybe you're taking things into your body you shouldn't. Maybe you're coveting something. Maybe the selfish desires inside you or the hardness of heart is taking control of your thoughts and they're apart from God. But it all begins, freedom begins by asking God to search you and know your heart. Any anxious way. Anxious is 1 foot in and 1 foot out with God. That's what anxiety is. So it's a divided inner being. And we need to get both feet in with God in order to experience his healing. And David goes on to say, and lead me in the way of everlasting. See, God takes whatever we surrender to him, wherever we're falling short. And it's part of our relationship with him. And he forgives us, he cleanses us, but then he leads us on that new way. I call it Restoration Road. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But we're on a new journey toward being shaped like Christ. And so no matter what happens in our circumstances, whether we win, lose, or draw, whether we go through a health scare, or like Kevin, you go through the valley of shadow of death. You don't have to fear evil because he is with you. And his goal, God's goal, is to shape you to be just like Christ, to have his heart. So surrender whatever's going on in your life today to him, any anxious thought, anything apart from his design for your life. And he will take it from you, he will heal you, and he will make you new again and use you to bring that restoration to others.
Hi, I'm Jay Chapman. Join me and Mitch on Restoration Roads next week.
Superhero Day.